We're going to be transitioning to an amazing panel led by Amy Peck. And Amy, I'm just going to pass you the microphone so you can introduce these amazing panelists today. Thank you for joining us.
Fantastic. Well, this is a group that I sort of regularly interact with, and we regularly have conversations like this. So this is going to be just like we're hanging out in our living room, having a glass of wine, coffee, and chatting about the metaverse. So I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves, and we can start with Rika Nakazawa.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I'm missing my glass of wine here in Barcelona, which is a little unusual, but good to meet everyone. Thank you for having me here in a Rockstar cast. I'm Rika Nakazawa. I'm Group Vice President within the New Ventures and Innovation Group, which is newly formed actually as of almost a year ago at NTT. And I'm Vice President of Connected Industry, and have been a big fan of your work, Amy, and all the great things that are going on in the XR/now metaverse, and looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Excellent. And Maria.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. It's incredible, all these talks and how much information and how we are shaping and helping to contribute to this field. I am Maria Pace, and I am technology leader in mixed reality at Microsoft, and I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And thank you so much for having me.
And Niko.
Hello, everybody. My name is Niko Chauls. I work at Verizon, where I run a product innovation team that builds products and solutions and platform capabilities at the nexus of XR and 5G. Thrilled to be here with this total rockstar cast.
And Cynthia.
Hi, yes, I agree. I'm not the rock star, although I play one on TV. So I work at Walmart, and my team is building the central 3D model pipeline that serves the entire enterprise. I always say to avoid digital triplets and quadruplets. They're hard to carry, as we women know. And we also use those assets in my creative team to create the marketing and merchandising scenes that you see. And I'm really happy to be here. I'm among giants, so yay.
Excellent. So let's dive right in. I love what we just saw, with Julie, Karen, and Sophia, and the Women in XR group, and kind of jumping from one world to another. But all the five of us are actually focused on, what's the business utility? And so, we talk about metaverse, and there's just a lot of hype. But really, let's talk about some of the use cases and utility that we're seeing, with our customers and with our clients. And maybe Cynthia, let's start with you.
So I think about this a lot, obviously, like everyone else. And in a big organization, what's happening is everyone is hearing about the metaverse. So there's those people that are hearing about it and doing something about it, hearing about it and wanting to be a part of it, and then hearing about it and not knowing what on earth we're talking about. So I think interoperability to me actually starts internally. And one of the things that I focus on every day is bringing those people together. Because if we don't align on what it is we're doing, we're going to have that situation where, let's say, we might build something that's too far forward, and then the marketing team is like, well, we don't understand what you did. So I always say, so goes inside, so goes outside. So I focus a lot on that use case, that business case, because it will ultimately serve the business well. And I think later on, I do want to hit on brand a little bit, because it's going to be key, I think, for doing this the right way. I don't think there's a wrong, but doing this in a way that benefits large and small brands. So.
Yeah, and I'd love to go to Rika and then Niko, which I can't say 10 times really quickly in a sentence without mixing up those names. But start with Rika. Also, just from because Rika, you're focused on infrastructure and IoT, and again, are you doing that same strategy, kind of looking internally, at NTT, and then externally to serve your customers?
Yeah, what was really noticeable, I'm in Barcelona for Mobile World Congress, and it was just how much there was around the metaverse and then conversations about XR. And I actually made a comment today that ironically, during COVID-19, with us all having something on our face all the time, I think in some ways makes it a little bit more translatable for us to have something on our face for XR, so whether that be VR or AR goggles. And in any case, so there was a lot of presence at that here. And in our work, it's less about how we internally use it and more of how it's a natural extension with our clients, because we've been in this space at NTT around the choreography of data, connectivity, and intelligence. And as Niko was saying with 5G, we too are pushing forward around 5G, private 5G specifically, and some of the use cases or applications and the value that we find of leveraging on-prem 5G, so to speak, is really about enabling those experiences that are going to hit the mark for some of the businesses, as we're all coming out of what I call a digital hangover, as we've all binged on digital over the past 2 years just to survive and thrive. And so using augmented reality XR to enable the workforce, especially in Industry 4.0 or manufacturing, oil and gas, resources, et cetera, has been something that has been really quite remarkable. I've been in the space, as you know, Amy, for a few years, and we were, pounding the pavement and like the table saying, this is what it's going to be like. And it's interesting to see how now from a practical enterprise application, because of the security enhanced 5G protocols, for example, and security being so top of mind, that's become increasingly viable, whilst there continues to be a lot of great innovation and investment that's happening in the space. And so it was really beautiful to see a lot of key stakeholders across the landscape of service providers, infrastructure providers, device makers, software developers, of course, all coming together to make this happen. And we're just getting started at this point, right? We were early pioneers a few years ago, those of us who are here, but now it's extremely exciting to see how it's all going to manifest moving forward.
And Niko, if you want to kind of follow on, kind of on the network side.
Yeah, so we are, I guess we would say we are purveyors of what I like to call smart pipes. Instead of the dumb pipe, how does this network enable this new sort of 3D XR universe? I try not to say the M word because it just causes confusion, and there are no common definitions that are readily agreed upon. That's probably the biggest challenge that we're facing internally and also with our customers, is just definition of terms. And I find that we have to start every meeting with, here are the words that we're using. Here's what they mean. If you disagree, that's fine, but this is how we're using them for this meeting, and then get into the meat of whatever you're talking about. But all of the use cases that we're dealing with are similar. I imagine to what everybody here is grappling with, from collaboration to communications to hard skills training to worksite safety to manufacturing, industrial AEC components. They all need a network, and they all need a network that can understand and be relevant for 3D holography, real-time telemetry. The one point I would bring up is the enterprise space is wonderful in that nobody cares how dorky you look if you're wearing a headset, or what color it is, or fashion statements around it. It's all about ROI, and and if the ROI is there, then companies will proceed. And in that respect, interoperability is almost a conversation that the Fortune 500 companies we're dealing with, they demand it as table stakes. They won't even engage in the XR space unless it's there or there's a path to get there. Beyond their innovation teams, beyond their R&D groups. So it's a responsibility that we all have as purveyors of XR and 3D and spatial compute. We have to solve that in order to move forward. It's required.
Yeah, I was having dinner with a colleague last night, and we were joking that it's not an IT department, it's an NO department. And to your point, that if you can't seamlessly get up on the network and not pull too much compute and have all the security protocols in place, it's not going to happen. Right? So it is a critical component. Now, Maria, you're coming at this from a completely different perspective, right? You're an enabler in a different way. So you're working on the hardware so we can access these. And HoloLens 2 is an amazing piece of equipment. So tell us how you're looking at this from the hardware perspective.
Yes. So of course at Microsoft we have been from the early days meaning 10 years ago, let's call it, which in this industry that's like ancient, right? I mean, even 5 years ago is ancient. So looking back a few years ago when my team was working on developing HoloLens 1, and a lot of questions around this because we put together the most amazing hardware team, technical team, looking at the display and all the optics and thermals and looking at the wearable comfort, etc. And there was a big question: should we target enterprise? Should we target consumer? We didn't know. And at the time, we decided to target both. Of course, from the consumer side, there was silence, nothing. From the enterprise, it was just amazing because people saw the value in this, and then they were able, but the hardware is just one component, right? Then you need your own applications. You need to develop a whole array of things to use the hardware. But we found that, yes, enterprise had a big value into this. So then we move on to developing HoloLens 2 from the learnings we had from HoloLens 1, and that was 100% focused on enterprise. And so, yes, we continue to see the value into this. Now, of course, the pandemic came, and now everybody's glued to their Zoom or Teams, Microsoft Teams, and now we begin to see the demand for this immersive experience, and we call it presence, right? We want to be immersed in a 3D environment, and that's when Microsoft is working on mesh for the metaverse. And internally, I do hear a lot of metaverse, but I think one point we all converge into is this sense of presence for us to collaborate in a 3D environment from anywhere around the world. And that's, I guess, the beginning of the stages. Now, of course, Microsoft also purchased recently Activision Blizzard. It was a very large amount of money, $70 billion cash transaction. And that, of course, sets a huge platform to continue building this metaverse, which, of course, we're still trying to define as we go in many different areas. But with the Xbox side and other tools within Microsoft, not only we are trying to enable enterprise to do more, but also the consumer side. So it's all shaping as we go, but definitely we need hardware. We need hardware, but the hardware has to look primarily something, lightweight, comfortable, and, preferably something that people can wear every day, all day long. And so there are challenges around that on the display side, battery, etc. But so excited to see all the progress being made around the technical paths for the hardware.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm with Niko. I, especially in an enterprise construct, I like to avoid the N word at all costs, because it's it confuses the issue, right? It's not helping the conversation go forward. To your point, everyone has a different kind of definition of what it is. It's really, what is the utility, what problem you're trying to solve, and what is the ROI. And so I'd like to kind of pull apart that ROI piece. And I think we can all agree we're seeing a lot of strategies where, especially with brands. And so, Cynthia, I'm kind of batting this in your direction, where there's this sort of frantic land grab. It's like, we're going to miss out. So first of all, metaverse didn't just drop from the sky, and the metaverse isn't going anywhere. So there's time. It is, in fact, infinite. It is not scarce. There's not a shortage of digital land. So, with a strategy and a value-first approach, how are you thinking about it? As Cynthia, I know you can't necessarily comment specifically on Walmart, but you are right in the middle of this, with your 3D and sort of CG background. So, how are you thinking? If you were to advise brands, what should they be thinking about, and what is a strategy first approach?
I love the ROI thing, because of course, right? But I think the definitions of R and I need to vastly change, just as the definition of what is success. And I was thinking that I am not sure that from a user engagement standpoint, that the definition of success has changed in the last 20 years. It's time spent, it's basket size, but it's time spent with that brand. And so we have talked internally, but also with my brand colleagues across the industry, that you have to be able to redefine the success. And it's going to be very uncomfortable in interoperability to say it's a success if they start with a certain landscape, literally, and then we make it easy for them to go away. Like, that's a very hard concept. And then the other hard concept, I think, with e-com especially is, you at PayPal, we always talk about greasing the runway to checkout, right? Less clicks, got to get them through checkout. But I think what Metaverse is going to teach us is the opposite. We want people to stay, and then we will figure out how to determine if they're going to make a purchase, or how it is that we benefit from that. But with R and I, those things, I imagine that it's going to be very uncomfortable for a long time, but we have to. And like with brand guidelines as well, like I said, I run the 3D pipeline, I run 3D creative team, and the criticism is always like, well, I can tell that's not real, and I'm like, come on. But now we're going to bounce the other way, and I've enjoyed that conversation too. Like, okay, if brands have human as one of their characteristics, now what are you going to do? We have to redefine those things too. And a third thing that I want to mention, which is important, is in an interoperable world, who owns the relationship with the customer when something goes wrong, mostly, and when something goes right? People were reticent to use services like Instacart and DoorDash and others, because if you have a relationship with DoorDash instead of the restaurant and you love the food, you're probably thinking about DoorDash more than the restaurant. But when something goes wrong, luckily for the restaurant, you blame DoorDash. So that's another thing. Like, how are we going to make sure we think that through? Because it's important when you're diffuse, but you start at a certain point, or you interact with a brand or a product or a representation of a brand. How are you going to define what the person should do if they have a need to relate to you, to communicate with you? These are all new questions, and they're not easy, and they're actually scary because they're complicated. So trying to find ways to simplify that and to start at one place and kind of walk our way through. But it's a whole new world. And I've talked to a lot of people in the brand industry, and I don't know if we're diving deep enough into the new brand guidelines. That we have to redo those. So, like I said, interoperability for me is an internal construct right now, and we all have to align. You know, not representing the company I work for, but let's say that you have a business where teenagers aren't necessarily your core customer. Well, now they are. So those customer profiles that we always talk about in meetings, those need to change. And so it's like this huge problem internally, which I know that we'll get to, but it starts with asking the right questions. And we're just trying to come up with what are the right questions that we need to answer. So
I think it's very
can I just
subject.
interject?
Yes, please do.
Uh, Cynthia, you have just described the pain that I deal with in a bunch of meetings on an ongoing basis. I want to just bring you into a lot of the meetings we're having and say, listen to Cynthia for 5 minutes, stop talking, and just listen, because you've articulated. I mean, if we stopped right now, I would walk away with redefine, R&I and digital hangover, and my life would be better. This is great.
Actually,
I'm not often asked to talk more, Niko. So I love you right now.
Amy, I'm gonna splinter off of something that was inspired by Cynthia. Rather than I would actually challenge what return means from a value perspective, because ROI ends up on spreadsheets. But what COVID-19 has done is that it's really humanized a lot of our work and our lives and how we engage, and XR has a big role to play in that. And so when we talk about return on investment, rather than just pure profit and cost savings, I think we have the opportunity to use XR in the metaverse to start appreciating the value that change can bring. And so that whole idea of, shareholder primacy and pure shareholder benefit to stakeholder. And of course, I'm now, not about to launch into a whole sustainability agenda, because that's a soapbox that I will not get off of, but really thinking about the impact beyond and what the value is to Cynthia's point. I think we really can use the future of metaverse to think about that. If we had a digital twin of the globe and we had it in front of us and we saw the fires and can feel the heat and can see the droughts and can choke on the pollution literally in the digital twin metaverse, I think it would be much more visceral, and I think a much more powerful agenda when we think about what is the return on making change.
No, but I don't think that's actually a splinter, because I think it's part of this strategy, moving into this metaverse, and that people don't want to just go to a mall in the metaverse, right? And that value is going to have a completely different definition, has to have a completely different definition, and some of the data points that will define value for brands is going to be there. It's not just ESG as a marketing, it's not just D&I as a marketing tool. It's got to be endemic to these companies, and that how they are giving back to the planet is going to impact what their value as a brand is. So I am actually glad that you brought that up. It's a little bit of a turn from interoperability, but I think in this grander landscape of things, this is an opportunity for us to redefine everything, not just R&I, not just value, but instead of replicating, I know that the Wired magazine had a great article by Kevin Kelly called Mirror World, several years ago. But Mirror World, I think, is just not the right approach. I think the beauty of this is that it's experiential, and it doesn't have to be a mirror of the physical landscape. That really this is an opportunity to think more broadly, but then sort of drawing back on how do we tackle then some of the technical implications of that. And we have very strong panels coming behind us to talk about that. But I think, Niko, I know you look at this a lot. When you're working with your retail brands specifically, how do you find that balance between, kind of advising them on what their customer experience would be versus the how do you make this happen? I think you're muted. Oh, we may have. Oh, did we lose you there, Nico?
We can see you.
We can see you. We can see you sort of smiling. All right, I'm gonna go over to. All right, we still can't hear you, Nico. But I'm gonna go to Maria because you did bring up
Yes.
Microsoft. Oh, are you back with us? Not yet, Nico. So we'll talk about Microsoft Mesh until we can get Nico back
Yes.
and better than ever. Yeah, we're going to spend all of our time in the metaverse, but we can't get off of mute. So Maria, Microsoft Mesh is again a great opportunity, a great tool for brands to be able to kind of leverage that toolkit to start to understand what those interactions look like. What are your thoughts on the how and the why for brands?
Yes, this is super exciting topic, and I think let me first bring at this point that accessibility is super important. And one of the things that I love about Mesh is that it's now being developed to be accessible from PC to mobile, and of course the ideal will be on a headset or a VR XR tool, because then you really have the ability to feel immersed around you 360, share your content with the avatar. So the avatars is another thing that we have mentioned as well, and that Microsoft is working on the platform for the avatars. And it's really amazing when your avatar can also follow your facial expressions, because you need to feel really like you are together in this mode. You need to be able to make eye contact, and it has to be all in real time. Right. And so that's why Niko's work is super important, because any lag can really affect the experience. Right. And so, so for brands, it's a huge open market, and we hope to support, especially for all the enterprise in this space. It is, I do see collaborations being made. I'm not sure if I can talk about them in public yet, but I'm sure we will see some things coming up in a few months, which is super exciting, and it's really opening a whole new world, a whole new experience, not just the retail shopping and stuff, but I think it's more of that connection with who you are, who your environment, and it's creativity. It allows you to also create your own space, and this is something huge, because normally when we enter into a space, it's already been made for us, and we just accept whatever is there. We like it, we might not like it, but in this particular case, it just opens a whole new world to say, well, I want to change this, and bang, you go and do it. And so it's just a whole other different way of thinking, really. So I'm very excited for what's coming up next, and also with all of the tools that Microsoft is working on internally. I mentioned Activision Blizzard, and during their negotiation, it was interesting that in 15 minutes, the word metaverse was pronounced 10 times. So, yes, so we still don't know exactly what the metaverse is going to be, but definitely I think both Microsoft and Meta have this focus on the metaverse. So super excited, and I'm hoping that Microsoft can continue working with the brands and the retail to really get it right. And it is important that we bring this humanity aspect, and especially we do it early on to set up a strong foundation that then we can build on top of this. And humanity is definitely very, very important into this. So very excited.
No, and that's true. I'm glad you brought up sort of the human element. So now that Niko is back, but just before you go, Niko, I just want to, if you guys have questions, we have a lot of firepower here on this panel. So I can see StreamYard. So if you're in StreamYard, please post your question in the comments. If you're on some of the other, on YouTube or other streams, post your questions, and the fabulous production team will try and move them over here so we have some time to answer them. So Niko, back end, how, front end, what and why? Go.
No, yeah, okay. Not sure I can cover all of that, but just on the sort of the impact, the humanity, the dealing with more of the humanness of what what these tools and this new universe can provide. I still find in the enterprise space, the biggest struggle is putting up qualitative and subjective KPIs against quantitative, data-driven spreadsheets. And despite everybody acknowledging, sometimes with lip service, sometimes more so, the importance of feeling, of social connectedness, of dealing with people or avatars as people, it's still given second place next to here's a spreadsheet that shows 2% increase in this. That's always going to drive either the R or the I more effectively than making an argument for we should do this because it builds better connections with our customers, or it enables you to feel or get a better understanding, to sympathize, to empathize, to understand what your employee, your customer, your consumer is feeling, or if they understand something, or looking them in the eye. All of that is critical, and we know it. Yet, how do we put that on the same level as sort of hard data and hard facts on the quantitative side of things? I think that's where we still need to push, and I'm not sure how we do that effectively, apart from through experiential demos, which I think most of us recognize that people experiencing things rather than showing them or giving them a PowerPoint is the most effective way to show the power of this industry. But that doesn't scale, and that's hard to do. And it'll get easier as the devices get smaller, lighter, thinner, and the network can support the higher data flow, lower latency, and edge compute. And the people who are building experiences like some of the ones that were mentioned earlier are building for that lighter device, for that advanced network. That's where it will really come through. But I think that is philosophically one of our biggest challenges, is how do we give the emotional human components as much weight as the quantitative data.
Yeah, and that sort of feeds back into what Maria was talking about, is being able to track enough of what we're doing, as humans, so that our avatars are that expressive. And I think all of that's coming. And I see Evo, commented, the power of collective experiences. I think that's really true. I think that this concern that we're just going to want to live our lives in the metaverse and not the real world, I think it's going to connect us in a way that's really meaningful if we all engage and have agency and have a voice in how this moves forward. And I'd like to go back to again some of the business case. And I've always been a believer that consumer adoption is going to be one of the biggest drivers for business adoption, because in the same case of mobile, it wasn't until they became really ubiquitous in our own lives that we then started to be able to have that really utility in our day-to-day, because now there's a learning curve, and there's the network challenges, and then there's the Department of IT/NO. And so, how do you see sort of games and entertainment and the consumer adoption, impacting how we can start to then really leverage these technologies at work and for businesses? And Rika, maybe we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on what Maria was talking about with what she found when they brought it to consumer and enterprise. And in the case of the HoloLens, that there was a take up on the enterprise and some crickets over in the consumer. So I think I might want to challenge that. And part of it is because when you look at the landscape of the workforce and in enterprise, it's a changing landscape where you have digital natives, the millennial Gen Zs that are coming in. And I was talking to somebody from ARM the other day, and he full on believes that the Ray-Ban glasses from Meta is something that is going to get a quick adoption if it hasn't. I don't know what the current statistics are, or at least something like it. And so I don't know that it's necessarily going to go from consumer to business. I feel like in the case of XR, that the business value is going to be a driver for it, where the workforce is increasingly having the opportunity to do work that is more digital. And so maybe I'll just provoke the thought that it'll go the other way with XR, where the drivers and the millennial and Gen Z, and now that we're in a world where we're 4 generations deep in the workforce, and XR frankly also enables people to stay and work longer, if you think about it. So people, the baby boomers and others that are aging aging or advancing or getting smarter, growing is maybe the better word to use. So I really think that there's an opportunity for the business value to drive more of the adoption, and less about how do we bring elements of gaming into the enterprise world to advance adoption. But I'll just provoke that for now.
Yes, I like to. Can I jump in? Oh, Amy, you are muted. I'm sorry.
I said, actually, I do want to continue that, and we'll talk about that next week at South by. But I thought we had 5 more minutes, but we are wrapping up now. I really want to thank, Ivo and Ben for inviting us today, and thank all of you. You are all amazing, and I can't wait to see all of you IRL next week.